Welcome back to the Female Fitness Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Danny. And in today's podcast, I'm going to talk all about consistency. Now, consistency is, of course, as a lot of you listen to this podcast will know, essential if you wish to achieve whatever health and fitness goals you're setting out to achieve. However, I think a lot of people, and I know this from my experience working with hundreds of women over the last 10 years, a lot of people approach consistency wrong and look for the wrong thing when they're sort of analyzing their ability to remain consistent. So, how people often approach it, which kind of actually sets them up for failure, is they approach it by trying to tick every box every single day. When the reality is that as human beings, that is impossible for us to execute. And therefore, it's setting us up to fail and to feel like a failure. And when we feel like we've failed, when we've set ourselves with an unrealistic expectation, we don't meet that expectation that we've set ourselves, we are more likely to engage in self-sabotaging behaviors, to actually just give up altogether because we don't believe we're capable of achieving our goals because we've classed ourselves as a failure. And we are less likely to achieve long-term success with our goals. So we want to get rid of these unrealistic expectations because, like I said, consistency does not mean ticking every single box every day. It doesn't mean never missing a training session or always eating what we might deem as being a perfect diet. Consistency instead is about our actions over the long term. So it is about acting in line with our values. It is about doing what's necessary to achieve our goals, yes. But when we analyze whether we're doing that, we want to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture and look at our actions over maybe the course of a week or a month, rather than our actions in isolation on each individual day. Because it is impossible to tick every box every single day, but what is possible is to make sure that you're showing up for yourself over the course of, say, a week or a month. And it's really important that we are adaptable with the routines we set ourselves or the structures we set ourselves in order to achieve that consistency because life happens and there are inevitable life circumstances that are going to get in the way of us behaving the way that we want to behave, that are going to get in the way of maybe us doing a training session every now and again or eating the meal that we might have planned, because that's life. Our conditions are never going to be perfect. And so, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're able to carry on when we inevitably slip up. And so, when you're thinking about consistency, what I want you to try and do is take a step back, zoom out, and look at the bigger picture and look at consistency as something that we're striving for over the long term rather than every single day of our lives or every single day of our journey, because that is unrealistic and that is setting you up to fail. And if you get to a point where you're capable of taking this step back, of zooming out, of looking the bigger picture, of analyzing looking at consistency as something that spans over time, you are going to be so much more able to succeed with your goals over the long term because you're going to give yourself credit for the action that you're taking, and you're going to feel more driven and more motivated as a result of that. Whereas, like I said, if you set your expectations unrealistically, you're just going to give yourself a hard time and feel like a failure. And that's not a very motivating place to be. It's not going to make you feel good about yourself. It's not going to make you feel like you're capable of achieving your goals. Whereas if you're more realistic with your expectations, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that that's being too easy on themselves or it's letting themselves off the hook. But actually, it increases our drive, it increases our motivation. And it makes us feel actually, I'm able to do this because your expectations are so much more realistic. And that mindset, that attitude to achieving your goals will increase your probability of being able to get back up when you get knocked down, whether it's due to illness, injury, or whatever else life circumstances might come up. And it improves your ability to still show up for yourself when things get hard because of how capable you feel and because of the mindset shift that takes place when you are more realistic with your expectations and you give yourself credit for the work that you are doing. It's also really important to recognize that when we're looking at consistency, we need to think about the behaviors and routines and structures that are realistic for us to implement given our lives and our priorities, rather than looking for the answers in other people, rather than looking to try and copy or emulate other people's training programs, routines, diets, structures. Because again, if we try and do that, it's going to hinder our ability to remain consistent because that is someone else's protocols. And if you're a really busy mum of two, for example, and you're also trying to work, you're not going to be able to train every single day of the week and behave in the same way that someone on Instagram whose sole job is to create fitness content. Like, you're not going to be able to copy that person's schedule or that person's routines, their training program, whatever it might be. And so you need to meet yourself where you're at and think about how many times a week you can train, given your life, given your circumstances, when in the day it's best for you to train, given your schedule, because that is going to increase your probability of success and of being consistent. So it's just going back to this point that I always talk about of there really is no one size fits all. And it's so important to treat ourselves as individuals rather than trying to follow generic approaches or trying to hold ourselves to other people's standards. And it's also really important to recognize that rigidity is something that often gets in the way of consistency. So when we're too extreme with our targets and we're too rigid with them, that often gets in the way of our ability to keep our efforts up because they're, like I said, we're not robots. We're not just able to do the same thing every single day. And we have emotions to deal with, we have feelings to deal with, we have other life circumstances that can get in the way, we have people to look after, we have jobs to do. And all of that is so important to take into account. You're not giving yourself excuses by taking these things into account. You're just analysing your situation and making sure that your goals and the targets that you set yourself fit that. And it's important to be adaptable and flexible with your schedules because if, for example, say you'd planned to train on a Monday, but something comes up on a Monday and stops you from getting that session done, if you are too rigid with your structure, you might feel like, oh, I've ruined it now. I'm not going to be able to get that session done. And be more prone to one, having a really negative mindset throughout the rest of the week, which is going to have a negative impact on you and your life. But on top of that, you'll probably be less likely to get the rest of your sessions in the week done, or you will automatically feel like you've not done enough to progress towards your goals, go into this kind of defeated mindset if you feel like you have failed by not getting that session done on a Monday. Whereas if you're someone who is more adaptable and flexible with your schedule, you will be able to recognize, okay, I wasn't able to get that session done today, but it's fine, I can just do it tomorrow or later in the week. And as long as I get my sessions done over the course of the week and I can perform well in each session and recover from how I've structured them, That's what matters. My body doesn't know what day I'm training. It doesn't matter necessarily what specific day I'm training, as long as I get that work done. And that's an example of how being adaptable and being flexible with your schedule and your targets can have a really positive impact on your ability to succeed over the long term, because you're so much more resilient to life happening and you're able to adapt rather than that stressing you out and you feeling like a failure just because you've not done something at a specific time on a specific day. So that is my point to today's podcast, and something that I want you all to think about when it comes to striving for consistency, because consistency absolutely is key. But it's important to recognize that consistency looks different for everyone on paper. What's optimal for one person is not optimal for the next person. And consistency for you may also change throughout your life, depending on your circumstances, your goals, and priorities as well. So, there might have been a time in your life where you were able to train 6 times a week, and that was sustaining, that was consistency for you. Given some normal fluctuations throughout life, you might have some weeks where you're ill and you don't train at all. But again, you get back on track the next week, and that is staying consistent with that. Whereas you might have other phases of your life where enabling yourself to be consistent requires dropping your expectations down to letting yourself train twice a week. And that's absolutely okay. It doesn't mean that you're doing worse. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It just means that your conditions have changed. And in order to stay consistent, you need to adapt your expectations. So, expectation setting, I guess, is a really important point when it comes to striving for this consistency that allows us to achieve long-term success. But I really hope that this little podcast has helped you with reframing consistency and considering what it might take for you to achieve that and for you to succeed with your goals over the long term. And I would really love to hear from you guys on what what is your version of consistency right now? And are there any questions you have on the subject and on striving to achieve long-term success with your goals? Because it's something that I help so many women with, and it's something that I specialize in myself, is helping women get to a point where they feel good in their own skin, they're performing well, they're functioning well year round, rather than going through these constant cycles of, feeling pretty good, taking an extreme approach, and then ending up back where they started or in a worse position. I help women find that place where they're actually happy and content for good and feel confident in their own skin year round, rather than having to go through these cycles of cutting and then regaining weight afterwards. So let me know if you have any thoughts or questions off the back of today's podcast. I hope you're all having a wonderful day whenever you listen to this. And please let me know if you have any requests for future podcasts as well. But I will see you in the next one.